The human brain is often described as the most complex structure in the known universe, not merely because of its billions of neurons or trillions of synaptic connections, but because of what it does with them. Chief among its functions is the construction of reality itself. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning to the time we drift into dreams at night, our brain is continuously filtering, interpreting, and shaping the sensory data we receive into a coherent, meaningful experience of the world. Yet this reality, compelling and convincing as it feels, is not a direct reflection of the external world. It is a construction, a model. The gap between perception and objective reality is not a flaw, but a feature of how our brain evolved to survive in an environment that demands speed, coherence, and adaptive action rather than perfect fidelity. Perception begins with sensory input. Light strikes the retina, vibrations reach the cochlea, chemical molecules bind to olfactory receptors, and so on. But perception is not simply the passive registration of this data. It is an active, inferential process. The raw stimuli are incomplete, ambiguous, and noisy. The brain must interpret them, and it does so through a series of complex computations informed by prior knowledge, expectations, and context. This interpretative process is so fast and automatic that we rarely notice it, unless something goes wrong or when illusions reveal its workings. One of the most foundational insights into this process comes from Gestalt psychology, which emerged in the early 20th century with the slogan, "The whole is different from the sum of its parts." Gestalt theorists such as Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Kafka showed that our brain organizes sensory information into wholes, into patterns and forms that are more than just aggregates of data points. We perceive contours where none exist, complete occluded figures, and group elements based on proximity, similarity, and continuity. These principles are not rules of logic, but heuristics of perception that reflect how the brain imposes structure on a fragmented world. Neuroscientific research has confirmed that perception is deeply shaped by top-down processes, predictions, prior experiences, and cognitive frameworks that guide and constrain how sensory data is interpreted. The predictive processing model, one of the most influential recent frameworks in cognitive neuroscience, proposes that the brain is essentially a prediction machine. It constantly generates hypotheses about incoming sensory information and updates these hypotheses based on the error between expectation and reality. Friston, 2010. In this view, perception is the brain's best guess at the causes of sensory input, rather than a straightforward readout of reality. This model explains not only perceptual stability in ambiguous or degraded environments, but also the brain's vulnerability to illusions. Visual illusions, for example, such as the Muller-Lyer illusion or the rotating snakes illusion, exploit our perceptual shortcuts and highlight how our interpretation of depth, motion, or size can be systematically distorted. Auditory illusions, like the McGurk effect, demonstrate how visual and auditory information interact in speech perception. What we see can literally change what we hear. These phenomena do not represent errors in the system, but rather windows into the assumptions and mechanisms that usually work to our advantage. Beyond laboratory illusions, our everyday perception is similarly influenced by expectation and meaning. Consider how context shapes perception in language. A string of ambiguous letters can be read as either the cat or the car, depending on the semantic frame. In social perception, stereotypes and biases, often operating unconsciously, can affect how we interpret others' behavior, facial expressions, or intentions. The same smile may be perceived as friendly or sarcastic depending on the observer's expectations and relationship history. Even our experience of time is perceptually constructed. Time may seem to drag in boredom or rush in urgency, not because clocks change, but because the brain allocates attention and memory differently. One striking area where perception and reality diverge is in the domain of pain. Pain is not simply a physical signal sent from the body to the brain. It is a constructed experience that involves emotional, contextual, and cognitive factors. People can experience phantom limb pain in a limb that no longer exists, or fail to feel pain during traumatic injuries due to shock and adrenaline. In placebo analgesia, the belief that one has received pain relief can actually reduce the brain's pain response, as seen in reduced activity in pain-related areas like the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, Wager et al., 2004. These findings underscore that perception, even of something as primal as pain, is shaped by belief and expectation. Perhaps even more fundamentally, our perception of the self is constructed. We feel as though we are a unified, stable subject inhabiting a body and perceiving the world. But this, too, is a model generated by the brain. Studies in cognitive neuroscience, including work on the rubber hand illusion and out-of-body experiences, show how easily this sense of self can be disrupted. When visual and tactile inputs are manipulated, people can feel ownership over a fake limb or even experience themselves as being located outside their physical body. The brain integrates multisensory information to generate the illusion of a coherent, embodied self. But this construction, like all perception, is contingent and malleable. Dreams offer another revealing case. In dreams, the brain generates a fully immersive reality without external sensory input. It constructs worlds, characters, narratives, and emotions, all within the internal architecture of neural activity. This demonstrates the brain's remarkable capacity to simulate experiences and reinforces the idea that perception is, at its core, a form of controlled hallucination, guided by sensory data when available, but always mediated by internal models. The malleability of perception has profound implications. It invites us to question how much of what we take for granted as real is actually shaped by the brain's internal assumptions. It suggests that people may literally perceive different realities based on their prior experiences, emotional states, or neurological conditions. In psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, for example, disruptions in the predictive coding system may lead to hallucinations or delusions, not as mere irrational beliefs, but as attempts by the brain to make sense of anomalous experiences. Corlett et al., 2009. These insights call us to a deeper humility. If our perception is not a transparent window to the world, but a constructed map shaped by biology and history, then understanding ourselves and others requires more than rational argument. It demands empathy, curiosity, and a recognition of the hidden forces that shape our subjective worlds. This is especially relevant in intercultural communication, conflict resolution, and therapy, where misperception is not merely a failure of information but a divergence in experience itself. From a philosophical perspective, the constructed nature of perception reopens ancient questions. What is reality if all we have access to is a brain-generated model of it? Can we ever escape our subjectivity? How do we know that what we perceive corresponds to what is really out there? These epistemological inquiries are no longer the sole domain of philosophy. They are now empirically informed by psychology and neuroscience. In conclusion, the brain does not passively reflect the world, it actively constructs it. Perception is not a mirror, but a model, not a camera, but a creative act. By understanding how the brain builds reality through inference, prediction, and integration, we not only deepen our grasp of human cognition, but also gain tools for self-awareness, compassion, and critical reflection. We learn to approach perception not as absolute, but as contingent, contextual, and, perhaps most importantly, open to revision. References: